Welcome, dear readers. You are listening to Time to Read, a Winnipeg Public Library podcast book club. We are recording today from the Millennium Library in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which is within Treaty 1 territory, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ininew, and Dakota peoples, and in the National Homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. In this episode, we will be discussing The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. I'm Trevor of the House of Louis Riel. Hail, fellow casters of pod. I look forward to an hour of great tidings and fellowship. And across the table from me is...
I'm Toby. I'm an outreach librarian based out of here at Millennium Library, and I was expecting more hot elves. And across the table from me is our very special guest.
Hi, I'm Erik. I also work here at Millennium Library, and this is my fault.
A good book can carry me away from an average and ordinary day, yeah. So keep it down, leave me alone, close the doors and turn off the phone, 'cause all I ever really need is a little more time to read.
And you, dear readers, we couldn't do this or wouldn't do this without you. If you've got comments about what we've read, or maybe some forgotten piece of ageless lore, we'd love to hear it. You can find our email address and all our social media outlets by going to our website at wpl-podcast.winnipeg.ca and scrolling to the bottom of the page. Hang around until the end of this episode and enjoy our most bewitching segment, Nerd Words for Word Nerds. But before we proceed further, let's check in with the panel. And you may have already noticed, regular listeners, that our regular panel is slightly different. Not only do we not have Dennis this month, but we have a special guest, Erik Mann.
Hello.
So welcome, Erik. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And maybe you mentioned you work here at the Millennium Library.
I do. I work in the Information Reference Department, which handles the main phone system for the Millennium Library. So if anyone calls the Winnipeg Public Library, that first number, I have a good chance of picking up the phone, or one of my colleagues. And I deal with a wide variety of patron requests. I assist with printing, help people navigate our local history room, and any number of questions.
Well, there you have it. So, listeners, I don't condone prank calls, but if you want to call the Millennium Library, you may get to talk to Erik directly, and he'll help you with all of your information needs. Now, as a tradition on the Time to Read podcast, whenever we have a guest, we usually allow them the option of selecting the book that we'll be reading that month. So, Erik, how did you come to be on this podcast?
Well, during our professional development day in December, I went to a demonstration, a presentation of the WPL Time to Read podcast. Unfortunately, this was news to me, and I decided, hey, that sounds cool. That sounds interesting. Maybe I can do that. And so, after gathering all my courage, I asked the WPL Time to Read podcast team if they would be willing to read The Silmarillion and have me on.
Now, to be fair, Erik, I think you also, before you stated the book, you asked if you could be on, and we were delighted, and we are delighted to have you. Mm-hmm. I think at that point, then, you dropped the bomb that The Silmarillion would be your choice. I think there was a collective exhale at the time, but here we are recording about The Silmarillion. So I, for one, am very excited to talk about this book. And I don't think there would ever be any other opportunity in my lifetime to talk about this book. So for that, I am grateful, Erik, for you choosing this. And so let's just see what happens. So before we get into the main discussion of The Silmarillion, Toby's going to tell us a little bit about the author, and then I will give a summary of the book. And by summary, I mean, well, we'll just see.
All right. J.R.R. Tolkien. He was born in South Africa on January 3rd, 1892, to Arthur and Mabel Tolkien. At 3, he went to England with his mother and brother, though his dad died before he could join them. Mabel taught her children at home. Ronald, as he was known, was a good student and had a love of botany and languages. He could read by 4 and write soon thereafter. Mabel died when Ronald was 12, and he was placed in the guardianship of a close friend, Father Francis Xavier Morgan, a Catholic priest whose guidance had an influence on Tolkien's faith and outlook. Tolkien attended King Edward's School in Birmingham and later studied language and literature at Oxford, graduating in 1915. He married Edith Bratt in 1916, and they had 4 children together. During World War I, he fought in France, though eventually contracted trench fever and spent the remainder of the war alternating between hospitals and garrison duties. Many of his close friends were killed in the war, which profoundly affected him. He returned to Oxford and completed an MA and then briefly worked for the Oxford English Dictionary, working mainly on the history and etymology of words of Germanic origin. In 1929, he started working at the University of Leeds, and in 1925, he returned to Oxford to teach at Pembroke College. At Oxford, he developed friendships with other writers and thinkers, most notably C.S. Lewis. In private, Tolkien wrote elaborate fantasy set in a world of his own creation. He wrote The Hobbit to entertain his children, and it was published in 1937. The Hobbit was so successful that its publisher asked for a sequel. 17 years later, Tolkien published The Lord of the Rings, which was put out in 3 volumes between 1954 and 1955. These became international bestsellers and established him as the father of modern fantasy. He died September 2nd, 1973, at the age of 81. His son Christopher, with the help of Guy Gavriel Kay, put together Tolkien's The Silmarillion, a book of myths about a fictional universe, which includes Middle-earth, which was published posthumously in 1977 and received the Locus Award for Best Fantasy Novel in 1978.
All right.
There we go.
There he is.
Full life, that guy.
Yeah, full life, 20th century. You know, he's in a war. He was a professor. Probably fair to say the godfather of modern fantasy.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this book that we're going to discuss today is called The Silmarillion, and it's a mystical smorgasbord of the history of Middle-earth. For the uninitiated, although Toby mentioned it, the world of Middle-earth is the setting for The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. It's written by J.R.R. Tolkien, but compiled by his son Christopher and Guy Gavriel Kay, and was published 4 years after Tolkien's death. Rather than a single continuous narrative, it is a collection of interconnected legends that include creation myths, the rise and fall of powerful elven kingdoms, the long struggle against the first Dark Lord, Morgoth, or Melkor to Toby, the fall of man through the destruction of Numenor, and the rise of the new Dark Lord, Sauron, whom will be familiar to Lord of the Rings fans. At the heart of this story are the Silmarils, and the meaning of the title, the Silmarillion, actually translates into the tale of the Silmarils. There are 3 magical jewels. They're crafted by the elf Feanor, and they become the cause of tragic oaths, betrayals, and wars. These include the epic love story of Beren and Luthien, the tragedy of the children of Hurin, and the doomed communities of Gondolin and Numenor. Epic in scope and biblical in tone, the book provides the ancient history and mythology that underpin the events of The Lord of the Rings, offering a grand, tragic backdrop to Tolkien's larger so-called legendarium. All right. So in the spirit of Dennis hosting, I need to ask the two of you, how did you find it?
Well, as I said before, this is my fault, and I do love this book. However, it had been over a decade since I last read through it. And so you might have heard the quote by Galadriel, stories fade into myth, myth fade into legend, legend passes on. I don't have the full quote. But the whole stories fading, that definitely happened to me. And so as I read through this book, I came across familiar names. I remembered great dooms for these characters. And I was correct, but I did not ascribe the correct doom to the correct character. And so I thought, oh, this character is going to have terrible, terrible things happen to them and be betrayed. And technically, yes, but not the way I remembered. So that was quite interesting that, oh yes, I know this book. Do I? Do I though? I seem to have forgotten more than I thought I had.
I'm curious, Eric, when you read it for the first time over 10 years ago, did you pick it up sort of your own volition?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so because I'm thinking that a lot of people who love The Hobbit and love Lord of the Rings have attempted to read the Silmarillion and have not got very far into it and put it down for various reasons. But so had you read The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings before
Yes.
that? So you had that
Yes.
background at least.
Yeah, I believe we have a set of volumes in the classic black with the colored rings, with The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and the Silmarillion, all in the same production run. We read through The Hobbit as a family, like read it aloud before bed. That would be in 2002. I was just about to turn 10 at that time. And I was interested in the world, and my parents were not going to read the entire Lord of the Rings to me and my brother. So I decided I had to read it myself. And every time I read through the Lord of the Rings, I think I've read through it 4 or 5 times now, I keep getting surprised by how long it takes them to leave the Shire. Because in my mind, I go to the movies first, and it's like, oh yeah, no, by the end of the first, like halfway through the first movie, they're out of the Shire. Yeah, cool. No, that the exit of the Shire happens 65% of the way through the book, which is much, much longer than it feels like it needs to be. But the Silmarillion is a bit of a different beast. It's not one contained narrative that he planned out. It isn't one narrative arc. It is a true history. It is a transcription of a oral history that Tolkien created over decades of his life. It's best read one chapter at a time, put it down, think about it, go about the rest of your day, then in the evening, pick it up again, read another chapter, put it down, sleep on it. Just this chapter by chapter, slow trek through history. It's not a book that most people are just going to sit down, open it, and then read through in its entirety. I'd be very impressed if anyone could truly claim that they've done that, but I know that certainly wasn't me.
Now, Toby, why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal history, either with reading Tolkien or not reading Tolkien, and how you came to discover the Silmarillion? I have a hunch that you have not read it 4 or 5 times.
You may be surprised to learn that I have actually read The Hobbit and all 3 books of Lord of the Rings. I read those in my early 20s when I was young and impressionable, and someone said, "These are great, read them." And I didn't know any better, and I probably, if I had started reading them now, I would have DNF'd, but I didn't. So I came into this book with a lot of hesitation. I definitely will admit that I came into this book with a lot of bias and prejudice. You know, this has a reputation for being inscrutable, unreadable, tedious. But, you know, I am no stranger to difficult texts. I enjoy a challenge. So I tried to put those things to the side and just approach this with, you know, an open mind. But it was exactly what I was expecting it to be. It was so difficult. It was a chore. Every page was a chore, and there was just so many names and so much to keep track of. And when I run into a name I can't pronounce in a book, I usually just sort of gloss past it. But this has so many of those names, and I'm like, is this a person? Is this a god? Is this a dwarf? Is this an elf? Is this a mountain? Is that like...
Not only is that mountain, but which name of this mountain? Because this mountain has 10 names.
Like
why does that mountain have 10 names? What happened on that mountain to give it 10 names?
Like I would read a chapter and be like, I have no idea what just happened. Yeah. I found a YouTube video of this person explaining this book chapter by chapter. And so what I would do is I'd watch them explain the chapter, and then I'd read it. And they're like, I was missing so much, because I mean, it's not just the names and the tediousness, but it's like the way it's written too. You know, it's like the Bible. It's so inscrutable. And so I gave myself 100 pages. I was like, I'm going to read 100 pages. And if I'm still not enjoying this, if I still don't know what's going on, I'm going to stop. And that's exactly what happened. So
Yeah. For me, I read The Hobbit. I think I was in maybe grade 7 or so, just because I kept seeing it on the school library shelf and I thought it kind of had an interesting cover. And then by the end of junior high, I had read the 3 volumes of Lord of the Rings, and I loved the first volume, Fellowship of the Ring. The Two Towers was sort of more of the same, and that was good. And then it felt like Return of the King. It was really just Gandalf on his horse riding around. It's how it felt the first time I read it. And again, when the movies came out, I loved the first movie. And the second one was more the same. And then the third one, there was definitely lots of Gandalf on his horse and other stuff too. But I was like, yeah, this is pretty much what I remember. So watching the movies and rereading the books, weirdly enough, I have gone back to the first volume a lot. Read that one probably 3 or 4 times. And that's the movie I've watched the most too, which I don't know what that says. I like the setup. I like the beginning. And I don't know if it quite sticks the landing. But again, shortly after I had read the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I had heard about the Silmarillion and how it was a collection of Tolkien's unpublished manuscripts along with notes and scribblings and things, and how it was assembled after he had died. And that it gives a much richer, fuller view of the entire history of Middle Earth. And I thought, oh, wow, this is great. And so again, I was one of the few that started it, and I couldn't do it. Like, I don't know. At the time, I probably didn't even realize that it was a compilation of different stories. I don't even know how far I got, but I can tell you that I didn't get far enough to even have any sense of it. And it was kind of disappointing to me in a way, because I was like, oh, I loved The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings so much, and I wanted more of this, and then I couldn't do it. And I kind of, just like The Ring, it passed out of history until this past fall when it was suggested by Erik to read. And so initially I was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then afterwards, I really leaned into the challenge of reading this, and I read through it. And I'm so glad I did, because I feel like now I can start every conversation with any new person with, "Hi, I'm Trevor, and I've read the Silmarillion," and just see where things go. Now, I didn't do it on my own. Like Toby, I had the assistance of very many YouTube videos. I had the assistance of something called The Reader's Guide to the Silmarillion, which I have to say was the most useless reference book.
So useless.
I've ever seen, because what it did, I don't know if you've seen this, Erik.
No,
it sounded great. It's in the collection. But what it will do is it will go chapter by chapter. And rather than explain anything or give background, it kind of just retells the story using different words. And when I mentioned that to Dennis, he said,
dear.
"Oh, it's kind of like reading like the Good News Bible version of the King James Bible." I'm like, yes, exactly. That's a perfect analogy. Like, why would you do that? So it's terrible. But I did find a couple of awesome resources. One is something called The Complete Tolkien Companion by J.E.A. Tyler, and it was invaluable, as well as the glossary in the back of my copy of the Silmarillion. And I had one finger in that pretty much the whole time. And I'm also like a map guy, and so I dug out the Atlas of Middle Earth that I had by Karen Wynne Fonstad, and it's fantastic. As you can imagine, it's full of maps. And she does it chronologically as well. So the first part of the book is all Silmarillion, and then it goes into The Hobbit, and then Lord of the Rings. And so but I feel like for reading a book for pleasure shouldn't require somebody having an atlas, YouTube videos, and reference material. I did get through it. I'm glad I did. And yeah, that's all I got.
Did you because as I was reading it, I was like, I could pick up little bits of what was happening, but so much was lost.
Yeah.
Did you get it? Like, when you finished it, were you like, oh, I got the story. I know all the ins and outs of all these characters and what they did. And
no, I did not get it. But I have to say, spoilers, at the end of, I think is the First Age, we finally see the downfall of Morgoth. And it is so satisfying to read that, just because this Morgoth character, formerly Melkor, is always causing trouble and stirring things up and spreading lies and starting wars. And
but everyone keeps giving him a second chance.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And again, it sort of is almost like, I mean, other mythologies, you know how you have like the bad brother or whatever, like, I was thinking of the Inhumans in Marvel Comics. There's Black Bolt and his brother Maximus, who turns evil. And that's what I was thinking of. And I guess it's also like maybe Lucifer
Yes.
That's probably maybe more what they was going with, because I'm not sure if Black Bolt was written yet by the time of this. But the whole idea that there's a fallen character who's just as powerful as one of the good characters. So when he finally got taken care of, I did feel a certain sense of satisfaction. But, oh my God, the way it was written and the fact that you would follow a character for a little bit and then they would kind of fall out of the story. And it would go to a totally different section of Middle Earth and follow other characters. But then those characters do interweave with characters that you've met before, which is why I kept flipping back to the glossary. And honestly, I think I flipped to the glossary sometimes multiple times on the same page, like where I will read a person's name, like Fingolfin. I'm like, okay, I know who he is. And then Fingolfin.
Finarfin. And then there's Finarfin.
Yeah,
Who
right.
the hell is that?
Well, I'll tell you what,
Finrod,
exactly. Just for a
Finwë,
moment,
Fëanor.
as Toby is yelling, let me just go to the F's here and tell you that Fëanor was a main character in it. He's the guy that made the Silmarillion, but he's the son of Finwë. And these are also people in his family tree. Finarfin, Findulis, Fingolfin, Fingon, Finrod, just to name a few. So again, I don't think we should be blamed for not following things. Why he really went for the F's.
Yes. This, I believe, is a riff on the number of Matthews, Marks, Lukes, and Johns in certain families' trees. So having names that are derivative of each other could be confusing, but so is a name of, say, Peter Peters handed down generation after generation. So it's not
But who is
without
he
precedent.
writing this for? Like, is he writing this for an audience?
So the interesting thing is he's not writing this for an audience. These are his notes, his drafts, his ideas of, okay, how did this world come to be? Okay, so I know how this came to be. It's Genesis 1, chapter 1. God spoke the world into being. Iluvatar and the Maiar sang the world into being, which...
You probably read that part.
I
Toby.
did read that part, yeah.
Yes.
Melkor has the weird song. It doesn't gel with
That's
the
right.
rest of them.
Discordant.
Yeah.
So it's a series of answers that he didn't weave together himself. He had scraps and notes that he left aside. He passed away, and his son went through his notes and built a work. Tolkien didn't plan the Silmarillion, like the whole history of Middle Earth. Presumably he did plan it, but he didn't have a design document, and he didn't have an idea for how the pacing would go, where the story would flow. He had, this is the history of the elves. This is the history of men. This is how they interacted. And they might be from different documents, from different points of view. And this is why when you have a chapter focusing on Turgon, the High King of Gondolin,
I got that reference.
Nope.
in his hidden city, you have from his point of view, but then you have the people who come into the city after, and those are in different chapters. It's all asynchronous because it's just a collection of documents from Tolkien's work that he never published. He might have been looking to publish them, but...
According to his Wikipedia page, he did try to publish this before his death.
And maybe, and also, as I understand it, he was a notorious perfectionist too. So he would often get something, but then revise it or feel like it wasn't quite ready for publication. And you had mentioned too in his bio how there were 17 years between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, because I think there were times during his life where he didn't work on it. There was years in between where he wrote The Lord of the Rings, not necessarily chronologically through the story, but he had certain chapters, or for lack of the better word, set pieces he had planned out and would work on those. And then he was working on the linking things, because we have to remember too, he wasn't a professional author per se. He was a professor of languages at Oxford, so he still had like all the duties and responsibilities, or whatever they are, of a professor, and he was working on this. I feel like, you know how like some people, when they get to a certain age, they get weird hobbies, like model railroading.
Sure,
right?
yeah.
You know, and I feel like this was Tolkien's model railroading. Although he didn't start it when he got to a certain age. He's like, this was a lifelong thing. He started these stories even before World War I, some of them. And so it's almost was something like, almost like a Sudoku puzzle for him. Like he would sit down and he created this whole language. He created this whole culture. He created this whole world in his head and wrote it down. And you're right, Eric. I think he was using these as almost source notes for stories that he wanted to tell. And maybe he only got 2 good stories published and well-known, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, but there's sort of the seeds of so many other possibilities that you can read about. I mean, how do you guys feel about the idea that his son, Christopher Tolkien, went through like his father's stuff and worked with another author, Guy Gavriel Kay, and published this? And not only published this, but continued to publish books of his father in various forms with various revisions and various editions for his whole life. Like, what do you think about that?
I mean, I think Tolkien was probably cool with that, you know, like he was a guy deeply committed to this world that he had created, and he was very prolific in creating stories and mythologies for this world. And I think the more of them that could get out into the world, probably the better. You know, this is not like a Franz Kafka type guy who's like, burn all my stuff when I die. Like I'm ashamed. I mean, I don't know why Kafka wanted all of his stuff burned, but like Tolkien, I think, felt, maybe I don't want to say that. I think Tolkien would be pleased that all of this has been published.
I think that was probably Christopher's best attempt at honoring his father, because as his son, he would have grown up with these stories, would have heard, hey, Dad, what are you working on? Oh, I covered this today, or I learned that the line of Huron was doomed from the start with great destinies. And just, I feel like those sorts of conversations would have been common in the Tolkien household, and I think it would have been Christopher's way to respect the memory of his father and to pass some of the joy on to others. I know these works have been hugely inspirational to a large number of authors and aspiring authors, of which I will admit that I am one. Anyone who wants to write a great fantasy epic would be in good standing to read Tolkien.
Do you feel differently?
I'm of two minds. I agree that it's a way for the son to honor the father's legacy and to bring more of these stories to light. But another part of me kind of feels sorry for Christopher Tolkien, that like it seems like his whole adult life, he's kind of living in the shadow of his father. And maybe he was okay with it, but there was just so much of it. Like if it was the one volume, the Silmarillion he did, I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. He found the best and the most complete of his father's works that were unpublished, and he published them after. There's actually something kind of sweet about that. But for the rest of his life, and he lived until I think his 90s, he would publish, like, I think there was something like 15 volumes of like the history of Middle Earth, and some of them
Children of Huron, the Unfinished Tales.
Yeah.
I think there might be 2 volumes of that. I can't quite recall.
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, great. I guess there was an audience for that. It just almost felt like, were people clamoring for all of these every last notes? I mean, aside from like, say, like Tolkien scholars or a very niche crowd. I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm of two minds. I'm like, I don't know how I feel. I mean, I feel like part of me like would be like, well, like, why is this like a cash grab for the son? To exploit his father's stuff.
So popular that they didn't need, the family didn't need the money.
No, I don't know any about the personal stuff, but you would think they were probably all right. And I do know that like Christopher Tolkien was very protective of the intellectual property, and he was not a fan of the Peter Jackson films.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh. So much so that apparently he did not allow after the 3 Hobbit movies come out, he didn't allow any other productions. Now I don't know how it works because there's a show on Amazon Prime, I think called the Rings of Power. And there's actually another movie coming out next year called something like On the Hunt for Gollum or something. And it takes place like between, well, I'm not sure exactly when it takes place, but I think it takes place just before the events of Fellowship of the Ring, because I think in there there's talk about how Aragorn, was hunting Gollum for months or whatever. So I don't know. I don't know how much of that is based on actual Tolkien texts and how much of it is maybe just conjecture written by people. Because I mean, one of the things is there is so much. There's so many stories in the Silmarillion that they could turn to flesh out.
Absolutely.
But to go back and again try to hunt down Gollum, I mean, I can sort of see it from like an advertising part of thing. Everyone knows who Gollum is. Everyone knows who Aragorn and Gandalf are. But I mean, it seems like a missed opportunity, unless maybe that has something to do with the way that the rights are. Maybe they aren't able to touch some of this stuff, but they can use the characters in a different way. Again, I don't know. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of intellectual property here, and with a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
The history of Middle-earth, when you read through The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, you don't realize quite how malleable the world was. When you have the creation myth in the Silmarillion, where the world is sung into being and you have all these specialists creating just parts of the world, and they don't quite know the whole story or how it all works together, but they're working as a group, a choir, let's call it, to build the world. And it is one little place. And then over the course of the history, through great battles, the world is reshaped, like valleys and hills and mountains get rearranged. The ocean gets changed something like 3 times. The amount of power on display is not what you would assume if you've just read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. The Númenóreans, in their arrogance, they sail to the west, to Valinor, to heaven, essentially, the place of the Valar. And for their arrogance, their fleet is swallowed by a huge gulf in the ocean. The fabric of the world itself has changed so that no man may sail west to reach Valinor. Instead, they will just go around the world to the east, which is an interesting idea. Like, before that, it was physically possible for a man to sail across. Elves can, of course, take, what do they call it? The straight road, straight across the ocean to Valinor and then enter those shores, as is their birthright. But for the men, they were not allowed to set foot in Valinor. Only one man ever does so, which, of course, I am now forgetting the name, despite having read it just 2 days ago.
Oh, yeah. It was Arendil or something like that?
Yes,
the guy
that
who
right.
he's turned into his ship is turned, he has one of the Silmarils, and he's turned into a
magic flying boat. Yes.
And his wife is turned into a fish or a bird or something?
A swan, a white swan or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, she gains wings and can fly. And
it's interesting because he was also doing the same thing that the Númenóreans were trying to do later, which was go to Valinor, and he was not destroyed. It's because maybe he had better intentions, because he was going with the idea of calling for their help against Morgoth. And then the Valar decided, like, yeah, that's all right. Like, we'll do it. He's all right. We'll turn him into a flying boat.
Yes, but he can't return home.
Right.
That's the important thing.
Right.
He set foot on Valinor, and he was deemed as justified, but he could not return. He was forever changed. And then, of course, the man gets a flying boat with one of the jewels and
his wife's a
participates
swan.
in a massive aerial battle with the King of the Eagles against Morgoth. And it's just like, this would make a really, really cool movie if they had a better script.
We talked a little bit, too, about sort of the style of the writing is not as engaging as if it was written conventionally, like with conversation, dialogue, and world building. Like sometimes there are entire world changing battles in this book that happen in like half a paragraph. Or happen off the page, and you're like, oh, okay, this big thing just happened. Okay, now this guy's called something else, and this world is now underwater. Okay, I guess we'll just go with it, And again, in fairness to Tolkien, he knew what was going on in his head, and these were his notes. But as far as like a good read, it doesn't help itself.
It feels like a historical transcription of an oral history. And that mindset of this is someone who wrote down what they were told or what they heard about, that sort of perspective is just consistent throughout. It's not talking to these people and writing down their history or these people's thoughts that were written down at the time. No, this is stories or songs passed down and then written down. So there's a sense of the passage of time. There isn't as much thought put to pacing or emphasis or drama. This is more like these are factual events, and this is like we've gathered their intentions after the fact. So this is what we say happened, and someone's just all writing this all down. It's not a narrative itself. It's a recording of a narrative, which is a good way to write a history book, but definitely makes for an impenetrable read.
Yeah, there's just there's so much distance. It feels extremely impersonal, and it reads like an ancient text, like it's hundreds and hundreds of years old, which I guess is what he's going for. But when I was watching this YouTube video that was explaining the chapters, I was like, this is really exciting, interesting stuff. But and if it was written by someone else, it could be great. It could be so exciting, but it's so dense. It's like the language, the turns of phrase, the syntax, even it's so hard to get into.
One of the things that kind of helped me was, and I don't know if this is even correct, but I kind of imagined that the stuff I was reading in the Silmarillion was actually stuff that Bilbo had researched when he was in Rivendell, because there are a lot of times where he goes there and he's writing, right, and he's the history, and I felt like maybe a lot of this stuff, that's almost like an in-world explanation for it. And like you say, it's not written as a novelization or a narrative. It's written as facts and as old legends and old myths written in a certain detached way that you really have to be interested in this and the connections to really put up with the way it's written. Now, having said that, were there any particular stories or parts of it that spoke to either of you in terms of oh, I like this part or this part? I mean, maybe it's a little unfair, Toby.
Yeah, I only read 100 pages, and of those 100 pages, there were very few things I understood. There was that spider creature that I was like, oh, this is cool.
Ungoliant.
Sure, yeah, that person, being, entity. And that thing where two characters meet and then stare at each other for 200 years.
Yes, that's right. He became King Thingol.
Thingol and Melian.
Melian, the Mayor.
That's some serious business there.
Yes.
So those were the two things that stood out.
How did they not starve to death? Because they were
200 years of eye contact?
Yeah.
I know. In the modern day, we're lucky for 5 seconds.
Yeah, it's very uncomfortable.
200 years.
I know. I could see, because Thingol was an elf.
Yes.
So I mean, I could see him being kind of bamboozled by this Meyer. But why was the Meyer bamboozled by this elf? It was true love.
He's very pretty.
Because he's a very pretty elf.
There you go.
And I guess magic sustained them all those years. So much so that when he woke up, he had a different name. Because wasn't he Olway or Elway or something?
Eru Thingol. Yeah. I
don't know why they did that. 2 names.
Tolkien, I get it. We live in Winnipeg. We have a street that has 5 names.
That's true.
But I've had quite a few years to get used to those 5 names. It might take me a few years to get used to all the names that every character gets. And some of them, oh my goodness. Yeah. Going back to your point, my favorite chapter because I'm a huge romantic at heart, is Beren and Lúthien's chapter, which is Tolkien's favorite, so much so that he got Beren and Lúthien on his headstone for he and his wife, which is just absolutely the most romantic thing ever. But yes.
Tell me about that one, because I didn't get that far.
So Beren is a man, and as you know, men and elves are not supposed to... Well, they have different social standings, for sure. And so Lúthien is the daughter of Thingol and Melian.
The long starers.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
the long starers.
Okay.
Somehow
From
they
the
had a
magical
child
kingdom.
during all that time. Oh, wait,
No,
afterwards.
after that.
After the long
After
It
starers.
is after
staring.
that.
Then they had hugs and kisses.
So Lúthien is devastatingly pretty, and Beren is just a guy. Yes, he's from the house of one of the 3 houses of elf friends, the humans who have long been friends and aides to the elves. So Beren has a devastating backstory, wanders into Lúthien's presence, sees her across a glen, and stares, just entranced, because she's singing. And her voice is the most beautiful thing he's ever heard, so much that he names her Nightingale, of course. When he finally gets to meet Thingol and Melian, they don't really approve of him. So Thingol says, okay, you really love my daughter. Prove it. Get me a Silmaril. Which is a problem for a number of reasons. First, that all 3 Silmarils are in Morgoth's crown, which is on his head. Mm-hmm. He's just a man. Beren is just a man trying to get something from the crown of the Dark Lord. That's a challenge. But he says, okay, if that's the only way, I'll do it, though it will kill me. Mm. And so he leaves, and Lúthien is like, yeah, no, that'll definitely kill him. He's not doing that alone. I'm going to help. And so she does. She follows him, and they hatch a plan, because, of course, he realizes, no, I can't ask you to leave me to my doom, so I guess you're coming along to help. Great. Turns out she can sing so well that she puts Melkor's entire fortress to sleep. Mm-hmm. And so Beren sneaks in, grabs the Silmaril from his crown, just one, because the knife broke, and that kind of started waking them up. So let's leave. So they leave. The giant wolf that had been guarding the door wakes up and bites off Beren's hand with the Silmaril. This is a problem because the Silmaril is a artifact of great power and causes intense pain to anything evil that lays hands on it. And if you bite something and eat it, you can't really, drop it afterwards. Mm-hmm. So the Silmaril is burning away inside this giant wolf. Beren and Lúthien are chased and flee back to Thingol and Melian. And Thingol goes, okay, good to see you're both alive and mostly in one piece after that great adventure. Beren, where's the Silmaril? And he goes, it's in my hand. And he shows his empty left hand, and he's like, okay. Thingol's like, okay, what about your other hand? And he shows the, stump of wrist, and he's like, yep, the Silmaril is in my hand. And Thingol's like, well, you got me. I wasn't expecting that, but, technically you did succeed.
Oh, loophole.
Loophole, which is actually proven after the fact when they kill the giant wolf and open him up. Mm-hmm. And there is Beren's hand still somehow clutching the Silmaril, still somehow in one piece.
Yeah. Incorrupt.
Yes.
I think that's what they said or something.
Yeah,
it's
something
so
like
weird.
that.
Yeah.
Which is just okay, so this one-headed man now gets to live with his lady love. And I'm forgetting a little bit about the end of that tale because That part of the tale is the interesting part for me. The fact that Bren then dies and then comes back and they get to live another lifetime together is a little weird, but it is something that Tolkien said happened. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only thing I was going to add to that is that I remember about 25 years ago, I was on a trip in England with my mom, and we had a day in Oxford, and we did the most nerdiest thing, which was we took the bus to Oxford, and we wanted to look at all the sites related to Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. And
that'd be so cool.
It was really great. And I had a general idea where C.S. Lewis was buried, but I wasn't 100% sure, so we hired a cab. And this cab driver was wonderful because he was not originally from England. He was from, I think, perhaps India or Pakistan, and he did not know who C.S. Lewis or Tolkien was. If you can imagine a cabbie in Oxford. But he got into this quest as much or more than we did, where we kind of directed him to sort of the area, and then he would roll the window down and say, "We're looking for C.S. Lewis." and then people would kind of direct us. And then we finally found this little churchyard, and we got out, and I said to the cabbie, "Now you're not just going to like drive off, are you?" He goes, "Oh no." He's like, "You've hired me. You have me until you release me."
Amazing.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, awesome. So we went and we saw C.S. Lewis's grave and his brother's grave, and everything there was very peaceful, very secluded, hard to find. It was a great moment. We got back in the cab, and he says, "Now let's go find Tolkien." And I'm like, "Yes, let's go find him." Now I have to say, Tolkien's grave is much easier to find.
Yes,
because he's. But still, this guy got so into it. At one point, he called his wife to say, "I'm going to be late for supper." And we did find Tolkien's grave. There's signage up for it. Totally different cemetery, but also in Oxford. And again, yes, Brandon Luthien is on the gravestone. And that was a great day. Like, I mean, there's a pub in Oxford called the Eagle and Child, which they called the Bird and Davy, and that's where Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and a few other professors and writers would meet. So, like, we went there for lunch. It was fantastic. It was so good. We went there back for supper, even though it was like the most nerdiest, weirdest day. But I do remember the Baron Luthien thing, which was pretty cool. So, shout out to that cab driver 25 years ago. You made our day.
I see from the recorder that I think we're about at the part where Dennis would cut us off. And ask for our final thoughts on the book.
Very good. So, do we have any final thoughts that we'd like to share that we haven't had a chance to share about the Silmarillion?
I will just say, read it like a book of short stories, one chapter at a time. Pace yourself. Don't try and read more than one chapter if you can't handle it.
And I will offer a rebuttal and say, do not read it at all. Unless The Lord of the Rings is like your jam. Like, this is your world. You love this shit. Like, just then by all means. But if you are of a more literary fiction ilk, you're not a sci-fi fantasy person, just give it a miss. You will. It's all good.
And I would say, if you do decide to read it, make sure you get yourself a good reference guide and an atlas and YouTube called up on your device. And these things will help you. And they genuinely did help me figure out the difference between an elf and a mountain, because sometimes I just couldn't tell. And so I'd say the more kind of backstories that you can read and assistance, it will enrich your enjoyment of this book. This is the section where we will talk about something else. And so we like to call this, "Can you tell me about a book I would also like?" Doesn't have to be a book.
Tell me something else.
Just tell me something different.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, who would like to go first? Who's ready?
Okay.
All right, Toby, what do you got for us?
So this was hard for me because I didn't like this book, and I'm not much of a fantasy reader. So I would recommend one of perhaps the only fantasy books I've read, which is The Fifth Season, which we read on this podcast and we all loved. So that's recommendation enough. But I was thinking about this book as a mythology that Tolkien created, and I wasn't into this specific mythology, but a mythology I do really like is Greek mythology. I've always been fascinated by it. I love the stories of Greek mythology. They're so ribald and sexy and weird. And I've probably mentioned this book before because it's one of my all-time favorites, but my recommendation this month is Circe by Madeline Miller. Circe, who's the titular character, she's the daughter of Helios. He's the god of the sun who drives his chariot across the sky. And her mother is Percy, who's an ocean nymph. And Circe's kind of a strange kid. She's not powerful like her father. She's not alluring like her mother. But somewhere along the way, she discovers that she has the power of witchcraft. Circe's claim to fame in Greek mythology is that she's responsible for Scylla. If you know anything about Greek mythology, Scylla is a sea monster who Odysseus encounters on his voyage, is later killed by Heracles. But Scylla was a sea nymph, and Circe has this crush on a guy, but this guy goes for Scylla instead of Circe, and so Circe turns Scylla into a sea nymph. So that's the origin story of Scylla.
Whoa.
And so Zeus is very threatened by Circe's witchcraft, so she's banished to an island where she hones her craft, and on this island she crosses paths with a lot of very famous figures in Greek mythology, including Daedalus and Icarus, Medea, Odysseus. She actually has an affair with Odysseus. They have a child named Telegonus. Telegonus later kills Odysseus. So it's just this like really beautiful feminist retelling of this pretty minor character in Greek mythology. I first read this book as a new parent, and there's a lot about motherhood I found very profound and really stuck with me. And I think, you know, in the Silmarillion, I think you really need a lot of background knowledge going into this to enjoy it. Whereas with Circe, you don't. Like, if you know about Greek mythology, that will help with your enjoyment of the book, but you don't need to know anything about Greek mythology to read and enjoy it. So that is my recommendation, Circe by Madeline Miller.
Excellent. And heavy spoilers for the Christopher Nolan film coming out this summer, The Odyssey.
Oh, yes.
I wonder if Circe will appear.
I hadn't heard that one.
Yeah. That's a good point, because she's a minor character in the Odysseus story.
Oh, okay.
Although they do have the kid together who later does kill Odysseus. So
spoilers, but
yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the take on it. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to that movie. Christopher Nolan is always.
I hadn't heard it was coming out, so now I'm very excited.
It's definitely worth seeing in the
Who's
theater.
playing Odysseus? Do you know?
I want to say Matt Damon.
Oh, no.
I don't know. I should. If only there's a way we could look it up.
Okay, I'm going to look this up while Eric
so Eric, did you want to tell us your other thing that you'd like to tell us?
I think I'd prefer you go first.
Oh, I'm happy to go. Unprecedented. So we were talking about the tale of Beren and Luthien. And one of the inspirations for that story is the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. And so my pick is a musical called Hadestown, which is based on the Orpheus and Eurydice myth. It debuted on Broadway in 2019. It is really, really fun. My daughter's high school did a production of it earlier this year. The main character, or the narrator, is Hermes, and introduces all of the characters. And the musical style is very kind of Southern blues kind of style. So there's a lot of sort of jazzy blues music. And the production we saw was fantastic. So it's the story of Orpheus and Eurydice told through the eyes of Hermes. That's my recommendation.
Good one.
Well, I had two recommendations written down, but I think the precedent has already been set, so I will instead recommend Robert Jordan's The Eye of the World, which is the first book of the Wheel of Time, which is a grand fantasy narrative. Yes, I have a type. Spanning 14 volumes and several million words, if you want to do the word count, of a chosen one taken from his backwater farm to depart on a hero's journey. We're all familiar with that trope. And he has a grand fated destiny that he must meet, and he spends much of the series trying to run away from that unsuccessfully. It has a good amount of politics, great amounts of swashbuckling adventure, and a very, very weird world that has fantastical magic embedded in its core.
Sounds like if you've enjoyed the Silmarillion, that definitely would be something.
It is an easier read than the Silmarillion. However, it is not shorter.
Many, many years ago, when I was volunteering for the Prison Libraries Committee and I was going into the Remand Center, that was a book that all the inmates wanted. They wanted the Wheel of Time books. Wow. So that's what I associate with those books, is inmates at the Remand Center.
They are good books.
Yeah, those are all.
And yes,
good
Matt
books.
Damon in Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey with Anne Hathaway as Penelope.
And I'm sorry to put this on you, but does Cersei appear, and who plays?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Yeah, no.
If she
That
does,
would
it
be
might
spoilers.
be.
Yes.
It might be a minor character.
Yes. Yeah, we'll have to
Can't
wait and see.
Well, I can't wait for that. Well, now we're going.
wait.
Whoa, God, here we go.
Charlize Theron is Cersei.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Well,
Well, now I have to see it.
it's going to be great. And now we're going to move on to that segment that Dennis likes to call a source of light, fun, or deep existential dread. This is our segment we like to call Nerd Words for Word Nerds, in which we explore a word or a phrase that's gotten into our heads recently. Who would like to go first?
I believe I will go first.
All right.
For my word is grandiose.
All right,
Ooh.
awesome. Lay it on us.
The dictionary definition declares that it is characterized by affectation of grandeur or splendor, or by absurd exaggeration. Also, impressive because of uncommon largeness, scope, effect, or grandeur.
Mm-hmm.
And as a fan of grand fantasy, and I mean, we just read the Silmarillion, and that is a grandiose tale. It is big, over the top, and kind of intimidating.
Excellent.
Definitely.
That's a good word.
So my word's not related to the book, but I recently discovered the origin of this word, and it seemed so obvious that I wondered why I'd never thought of it before. And it's the word quarantine, which I think we all became very familiar with during the COVID years. Quarantine comes from the Italian phrase 40 giorni, meaning 40 days. And of course,
Yep.
a word with quarts would be related to 4 or 40. You know, we have quatre or 40 for 4 or 40 in French. A quarter is 1/4 of a dollar. A gallon is 4 quarts. A quartet is 4 musicians. Like, why did I not think that quarantine was also going to be related? But the origin of the word is that in the 14th century, during the Black Death, ships arriving in the Venetian Republic were required to anchor offshore for 40 days before anyone could disembark. The idea being that if anyone on the ship had plague, it would be revealed in that time. And at first, the period was actually 30 days. It was called Trentino. But the authorities later extended that to 40. No one really knows why. It could be like biblical reasons, 40 days and 40 nights, 40 days of Lent. That's the origin of quarantine. The original meaning, very literal, but over time it's just become a medical isolation period. Not always 40 days. So there we go.
Very
Fascinating.
interesting.
Yeah, quarantine.
So my word this month might be obvious, but it's legend. And the original term from the Latin legenda literally means things that have to be read. So in this case, the Silmarillion literally is a legend. It was developed started during the Middle Ages. So in the Middle Ages, many parish churches were served by priests who were barely literate and capable of writing a sermon that was intelligible and correct. So the bishops and the monasteries would supply them with materials that were most often just the lives of different saints for them to read to their congregations on Sundays. And so those became known as legendaria, things to be read. And, it became sort of canon in the sense that these are the stories that are repeated, and over times, they might get a little embellished, or they might involve certain things that may not 100% have happened, wink, wink, like with a saint. The other meaning of the word legend comes from maps. It goes back to the original idea of legenda, which is that a thing that needs to be read in order to understand the map. So a map's legend are explaining what the little symbols and things mean. So anyway, yeah, legend.
Very cool.
Unfortunately, now that's all the time we have this month to talk about the Silmarillion. Thank you so much for joining us, dear readers. For our next episode, we're going to read and discuss Walking the Bypass by Ken Wilson. Walking the Bypass recounts Ken Wilson's singular experience of walking alongside the decidedly pedestrian, unfriendly Regina Bypass, all while situating the highway within the ongoing history of settler colonialism in southern Saskatchewan. Through a series of ambitious and unconventional walks, Wilson sets out to understand the arrival and significance of the new and politically contentious highway encircling Saskatchewan's capital, as well as the global transportation hub, a sprawling warehouse park the bypass was intended to serve. He offers new perspective on these heavily traveled yet untrodden spaces in a region dominated by industrial agriculture and high-speed transportation. Reflecting on the profound transformations to the land since the arrival of settlers in the 1880s, he wonders whether it's possible to form a connection with the land through walking, even on the gravelly edge of the freeway. In vivid and sincere prose that captures the thoughts of a man trudging along the roadside, Walking the Bypass explores how walking can transform non-places into places and enable settlers to forge a relationship with the land around them. Have comments or book suggestions for us? Send us an email. You can find all our contact info at the bottom of the page at wpl-podcast.winnipeg.ca. You can also find all our past episodes there too. And if you haven't already, subscribe to Time to Read on your favorite podcasting service and maybe leave us a review. Tell your book-loving friends about us too. And until next time, make sure you find time to read.
All I need is time to read. All I need is time to read. All I need is time to read. All I ever really need is a little more time to read.
The end.
We did it.
Wow.
Wow.
I just feel like I should get on while we're still recording that Dennis hated this book.
Yeah.
No, that's fair.
He would have brought nothing but pure negativity. So,
Sorry, Dennis.